and also meet fellow risk professionals on this topic. So just a little background on my where I come from. I spent 21 years with the Indian Police Service, 7 of which were with the Central Bureau of Investigation. So I was investigating all kinds of frauds. Then I spent 3 years with NASCOM looking at data security. 3 years with ICICI Bank as head of Financial Crime Prevention Group. 2 years with Citibank heading investigation and security. And 2 years in advisory capacity in one of the big 4 companies. And now I am, of course, CEO of Data Security Council. I have seen the fraud problem from many directions. And many times people look at fraud as something which is very, in their context, something which is which can be called by any other name. But I would look at fraud as a variant of deceitful financial fund transfer in various contexts. So, for example, I spent 5 years with banking, and in banks we had a classification of 3 kinds of frauds. External fraud, so credit card frauds and all that internet banking, where the adversary was outside the organization. Internal fraud, where an employee was doing something and dipping into customer's account or dipping into bank's account and enriching himself or herself. And the third was loan frauds, where the borrowers were committing a fraud on the bank. So that was a nice classification, and obviously external fraud was ignorable. Nothing much to worry about. The customers anyway took the hit, so banks had nothing much to be concerned about. Internal fraud was very occasional, and nobody could figure out how to prevent it. So every time internal fraud happens, the modus operandi is completely unique to that particular bank, and very difficult to foresee, build a library, as we were mentioning. And there are, of course, ways of not falling ill, as you know, eat properly, exercise, sleep well, meditate, you will be all right. Yeah, but if you start taking tablets for one particular disease, then other diseases will hit you at some point of time. So internal fraud was again something very occasional, can be a big impact. I'll give you some numbers later. And the third category was loan fraud, which is humongous. If you look at bank fraud numbers, and I'm going to talk in banking context because that is the world I know. External frauds were 65 crore rupees. So all your credit card frauds, net banking frauds, all amount to just 65 crore rupees across the country. Internal fraud can be large. So the largest internal fraud in recent times has been the Citibank fraud in Gurgaon. You would have read about it. 400 crore rupees. One employee doing this fraud and very successfully evading detection for some time. So look at the magnitude. And we, as assurance professionals, you worry about internal frauds. And that is where I think a lot of thought process goes into. But it can be completely out of the box thinking by somebody who is out to beat the system for whatever reasons. But the loan frauds were 8,000 crore in 2013. And the last year's figure, if I heard correctly, is 20,000 crore. So that's a whole different area. We are not going there because there is a whole different approach to be taken there. But as I think, and the fourth category, which I am not even going to mention the numbers, is corruption. It is fraud being committed by people who are in a position to misuse their position, official position, to enrich themselves. And that can run into very large numbers, as you would have heard of 3G and whatever. So I think as professionals, we need to look at how the picture is changing and how do we deal with it. And I loved the analogy Mr. Seth put up in the beginning of somebody wanting to guard the same spot where bomb blast happened 20 years ago. Yesterday I came from Delhi. Flight was late by 2 hours as usual. And I was very keen to reach home. And on the road, Western Express Highway, which is the main artery of the city, I find that there is a traffic jam at 12 in the night. And why is there traffic jam? Because after some time I discovered, after 50 minutes of crawling through the traffic, I see there is a nakabandi going on. Now, you are all Mumbaites, you know what is nakabandi. So there are barriers put on the road, and there is a police party which is flagging down vehicles and checking their papers. And most of the times you will see them checking two-wheelers, not big cars, not trucks, nothing. Now, this nakabandi is a very old way of policing or control, as we would call it. The control is very ineffective. And this kind of enforcement happens in other countries also. So there is a traffic policeman with a radar gun measuring the speed of vehicles. In 10 minutes, the news spreads to people who are traveling on that road because it is passing through people who are alerting each other saying that, okay, police check up ahead, please be aware. So So people who are going to, who are over-speeding can just come down within the speeding limit and be very lawful citizens. And I don't know how many such people they end up catching. But the effectiveness of controls is something which has to be evaluated repeatedly and in the context of changing threat. Now, what are the changing threats we are looking at? I mean, in the policing context, of course, bomb blast, terrorists, somebody carrying a bomb is the threat. Is he going to be caught by Nakabandi? I doubt. I mean, if I were a commissioner of police, I will have some another strategy, which is more intelligence-based. So we're looking at this issue of how to detect fraud and what kind of sample testing or what kind of full dataset testing is going to lead to it. And again, there are new techniques which vendors keep coming at with you, big data analytics, some tools which will crunch data and tell you exactly what is wrong in the whole data set and a fraud being committed or something going wrong. But I doubt, because many of these tools are solutions in search of problem, as they call it. Somebody has built a great system, they want to sell it, they will come to you and say, okay, this applies to your problem, please buy it. Unless as professionals you understand the tool, how it works, how effective it is going to be, you are going to be investing in something and management is going to question you on that, something which may not really produce any very fantastic results. So I'm not going to use solutions, I'm just raising problems because we have seen these problems all across. And it is important to know the ecosystem changes, how they are happening. And it was great to hear Mr. Kundu because I think he comes from a segment which is not much under focus. Financial services is always under focus, banks and everybody. But what kind of scenarios are happening? If there is a firewall probing happening from the guest network, that's a scenario which somebody needs to then build a solution for and so on. So I think exchange of information, learning from each other, keeping them ears and eyes open is something very important. Stepping back a little, I think laws itself is an issue sometimes which keeps coming up. And Companies Act, of course, has been amended recently, and hopefully it will produce results. But as Mr. Kanere was telling me that independent directors are going to step away from this, saying that, okay, there is too much of responsibility. I don't really want to take up this job. So putting too much responsibility on one set of people also may not be very effective. So Companies Act was amended after Satyam. Hopefully it will produce the results, but we have to wait and see. But if you look at other kinds of frauds in India which recently have happened, Speak Asia. Who could have thought that Speak Asia will end up duping investors citizens of country, not even investors, 1,200 crore rupees. Money remitted for buying software, 800 crore rupees remitted to Singapore for buying software. So money moves fast, money gets collected rapidly without anybody getting wiser about it. These frauds are happening completely under the radar. Nobody even will read about this until it bursts on the scene saying that, okay, small guys in small towns have lost money because they were trying to invest money into this. Multi-level marketing is a completely grey area in law. There are some schemes under the Reserve Bank has one law. SEBI has been told to look at this. There's no law which really says what are pyramid schemes. Pyramid schemes have been around for so long, Ponzi schemes. Madoff happened recently. Is the legal response there? I don't think it is there. I spent 25 years in law enforcement with some part outside, of course. But the laws are moving very slowly. And of course, they will move slowly because there are bigger problems to solve. As you know, I come from Delhi where we are now thinking that how do we cope with this odd even number plate issue. And somebody was saying in the morning on the TV today, I'm going to get 2 number plates and let the police catch me. So, there are bigger problems and, bigger situations coming up. So laws will move slowly. So how do we deal again with this? So substantive part, multi-level marketing, Ponzi schemes, these have been around and we don't see a proper response. A lot of pressure needs to be put on the policy level to say, okay, please do something about this. These are clear fraudulent situations. If somebody is being asked to get 2 members to get some benefit from the scheme, and that is in 13 levels you are going to exhaust the world's population, that kind of scheme has to be declared fraudulent and no company should be able to operate like that. But we don't have that kind of very clear legislative scenario. Procedurally, now I mentioned about this 800 crore going to Singapore. International cooperation on investigation very poor. Firstly, governments believe that they should deal with each other and not police in one city dealing with police in another city. So police in Mumbai cannot call up police in Singapore and say, okay, here is an account, please block the money, it has gone there. It has to go to the court here. The court will send to Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of External Affairs, their counterpart in that country. Then it goes down. It takes months. Nothing comes before several months have passed. When fraudsters are moving at the speed of light, because their transactions are happening at the speed of light, as electrons move and money moves, and then they change identities, they go to third tax havens. Are we really serious about this whole problem? So that is another very high level problem I wanted to flag. Now, I saw there is a session on cyber crimes, but I just thought that cybercrime is one area I've been working on in the last few years. And in Data Security Council, we actually look at how to protect companies' assets. Now, primarily these are information assets, intellectual property, customer data, corporate plans, but also increasingly, of course, since all business is now happening through IT systems, whatever the assets of an organization are going to the assets to be protected. So for banks, it is going to be money. And there is a certain way to go about it. Obviously, things are not completely bad. There are frameworks available for saying, okay, how do we go about it? You need to look at people, process policies. You need to look at, use of data tools. You need to look at how employees are aware about frauds. And I'll give you just an example. It came in the papers a few years ago, few days ago. So ONGC, buys some stuff from Aramco, which is one of the largest oil companies. Sells. So Aramco buys some stuff from ONGC, and then they pay money to ONGC. It turned out that Aramco received a mail saying that, okay, the account is changed, please remit money to this particular account. And it's not clear whether the money moved or not, but 198 crore rupees worth of payment was made to a wrong account. And then the complaint was filed here saying that, okay, money is missing, please recover and find out the criminals. Now, how could this have happened? So obviously the details are sketchy, but somebody in Aramco received a mail purporting to be from ONGC. According to details available, it was a cousin domain, as they call it. So it looks very much like the original domain. So as you know, the letter I looks like 1, number 0 looks like letter O, and so on. So it is not very difficult to book those domains and then send mails from that domain. And somebody who is careless about receiving a mail and then answering to it will end up corresponding with a fraudster and then acting on the instructions of the fraudster. So this is the external attack. But it may also happen that, I don't know what happened in ONGC case, but a mail system can be penetrated and somebody's account can get taken over. So CFO's account is taken over and CFO is unaware that mails are being written from his account, but there are instructions going to parties about payments and then remittances are being made. It is not very difficult to penetrate these accounts, by the way. As you know, information technology is by inherently a very weak infrastructure. It is basically lines of code. You change one line of code, one instruction, the output of the program changes. And nobody gives assurance. I mean, you're talking about assurance. Software assurance is something which is very difficult to achieve because there are hundreds of people involved writing the code. They work on a certain model. They have certain timelines. There is a certain testing process. It doesn't really give that assurance that, okay, it's ironclad and nothing will move. Nothing will happen, wrong will happen. So this is the problem with the whole IT-based business, and all businesses are on IT. So we need to understand the risks, get companies to follow the right processes, right frameworks, invest into programs. I will just give another example. Recently there was again case in Mumbai. I am talking about everything in public domain. I am not going to share any secrets which I may have come across. One bank in Mumbai filed a complaint of a fraud of almost 3 crore rupees of some 800 cards not issued by them, but those cards were used in transactions. Now, obviously, a card issued by a bank has to be activated by the bank. Without that, how will you do transactions? But this particular, I am not going to name the bank. In this particular case, the transactions happened. So obviously, somebody in the bank, and a lot of things are outsourced, as you know. Card embossing, card distribution, couriering, everything is outsourced. Bank is only supposed to look how it is going to work and how best it can be done. I am not blaming the bank, but the fact is that cards could be activated could be used without being formally, there being no customers. KYC failure, IT systems failure, process failure, outsourcing failure, all kinds of failures are glaring at this particular scenario. Now, there is a very simple program called PCI DSS framework, which you would have heard of. It applies to payment systems. Very baseline. It's like saying, okay, please, eat fruits every day. It is like that. Follow a certain process. PCI DSS helps doing that. It doesn't say that you will not fall ill if you keep doing this. It just says your chances of falling ill are low. How many banks have implemented PCI DSS? Very few. Why? Because business thinks it is a nuisance to work on these kind of security projects. Risk is low. Ab tak kuch nahi hua, ab kya hoga? And so on. So these are the kind of challenges that we see. I'm not going to give you any solutions, as I said. I'm just going to flag problems out of which solutions will emerge. If we are aware of these problems, we can prioritize them, we can put a value to them. As I said, the electronic fraud last year were only 65 crore rupees. But look at this ONGC fraud. Had it happened, it would have been 3 times the loss in the entire year across all banking in one case. So fraud can scale very fast. There's no thumb rule that last year it was at 100, it will be only 10% more this year. It can really escalate rapidly because there are people who are looking at various kinds of chinks and they are going to exploit them. This is the only slide actually on the screen. I will not take much time because I think we are running out of time. But this was the bank fraud which happened, wherein 2 separate instances, $45 million were stolen out of ATMs. Again, how they were stolen? Prepaid cards were cloned. Prepaid cards were distributed in 23 countries. The computer which was authorizing payment of these prepaid cards was hacked into and the limit raised to 1 million. So that a $500 card could now dispense cash up to 1 million. And then the money was withdrawn within a space of 10 to 12 hours in this thing. Now, this is the kind of scenario which can emerge. $45 million worth of money gone poof in 2 days. Separate instances and no lessons learned because first instance, the IP address which was used to hack into the computer, same IP address was used in the second case as well. So nobody is actually looking at IP address sharing, no lessons learned and so on. And these 2 companies actually were in India, one in Pune, one in Bangalore. So the risk is very much near our doorstep or within our country. And there are, these kind of things can happen and can depress the confidence into the financial system, if this continues to happen.